Well, good evening, everyone. It's good to see each and every one of you. We're always so thankful for the opportunities that we have to worship God in spirit and in truth, and to open up God's Word and certainly meditate on it. I'm going to be an imperfect vessel, but I believe that our women met. I wasn't here for that. I was trying to watch three little ones as they were saying, "Where's Mom? Where's Mom?" They were very concerned about their mom. But the women met, and we know that the card group has kind of transferred to Jill, and the women are kind of doing that. And also, it is my understanding that the women have also got together and kind of want to organize food a little bit better in terms of a food coordinator, a food organizer, and I believe that's Carrie. And we're very thankful for her. Carl's eyes just got big. But I believe Carrie's going to be over that particular initiative, and there's kind of two branches. If you would be willing to make a meal for someone at some point during the year, and you'd like to be on that list, and this meal could be bought or this meal could be prepared. If you'd like to be on that list, I believe the list is in the back, and I think the idea is as the year goes on, it'll distribute those meals as we can think of individuals that need those, as those come up in the women's meetings. And also, I think there's another list for funerals to kind of distribute it a little bit more. If you're just willing to make like one particular thing for a funeral, such as rolls or a side or something like that, they're trying to get that list as well, so that when a funeral happens, I think the idea is that everybody can kind of get together quickly, make one thing, and then we have enough to support that. So we're very thankful for the women and the things that they are doing and working on. So thankful for that. Many talents that I do not have, and it's always good when we work together. And I hope that I portrayed that message well. But if you have any questions, certainly ask Carrie, Jill, and really any women that are involved in that. And certainly as the months go on, we look forward to many of the great things that come from us as a family working together. For this month, we've been looking at the book of Ecclesiastes. We looked at chapter 1, chapter 8, and now we're looking at the final chapter. It's so hard, even in a month, looking at a book, we just cannot simply hit on everything. But chapter 1, we were really trying to get a feel for the book, and Ecclesiastes is a powerful, powerful book. A powerful book that really gets us thinking about a lot of things in life. And as it opens, vanity's all is vanity. And really there's this idea that there's a lot of things in this life that are futile, that are empty, that don't have really long-lasting value. And as we look at our lives, it's unfortunate that sometimes we look at our lives, and as we reflect on our lives, how much of our lives are filled up with things that don't necessarily matter. There are things that are essential, there are things that are needed. But a lot of times we put more value on things that are truly passing away. And throughout the book of Ecclesiastes, I believe Solomon really hammers on multiple ideas that many times people will dedicate their whole lives to. But all is vanity. And I think really there's a challenge to the book as you go throughout the book. I think the challenge is to rise above worldly pursuits. So many times we'll get focused on the world, we'll get focused on the things around the world, and these things will actually lead us away from God. And I think that's what Solomon is really kind of focusing on throughout the book, is you want to focus on this, really think about the end. Think about how this plays out. And certainly we're coming to the conclusion of the book. We also looked at chapter 8, and we looked at the idea of administering discipline quickly and not waiting on that. There's a lot of wisdom throughout Ecclesiastes, but I think the challenge is to rise above worldly pursuits. Certainly there are things that are needed for life, there are things that are essential for life, but can we focus on those things that truly matter when it's all said and done? And as Ecclesiastes is wrapping up, many people throughout their lives, they will try to pursue things that are almost like the wind. Things that they're trying to grab a hold of that they can't truly grab a hold of, things that are passing away, things that are not going to make an eternal difference. And many times we pursue those things. Can we rise above those certain pursuits and make sure they don't take over our lives? In Colossians chapter 3, verses 1 and 2, it says, "If then you were raised with Christ, seek those things which are above, where Christ is, sitting at the right hand of God. Set your mind on things above, not on things of this earth." Certainly that's a challenge for us each and every day. But as we come to a conclusion of the book, I think the book in the end of chapter 11 and chapter 12, it really gives us a summary of life. And I think that's important for us to look at from time to time. As we look at in Psalms, when Moses writes one psalm there, he says, teach us to number our days. And I think when we look at the tail end of Ecclesiastes, that's really what it forces us to do. Look at your life. Look at your life, and as it says in James, our life being a vapor, our life does pass so fast. But looking at Ecclesiastes, looking at the tail end of chapter 11, and then we're going to try to go to the end of the book. But the end of chapter 11, it's really talking about youth. Look at verses 9 and 10 in chapter 11. That's where we're going to pick up this evening. It says, rejoice, O young man, in your youth, and let your heart cheer you in the days of your youth. Walk in the ways of your heart and in the sight of your eyes, but know that for all these God will bring into judgment. Therefore remove sorrow from your heart and put away evil from your flesh, for childhood and youth are vanity. You know, a summary of life is it starts with youth, does it not? We start out young, and certainly when we think of our youth, there's a lot of things that we could do in our youth that as we age, we are not as able to do as we look at our life. But certainly youth is a summary of our life. We all start out young. And you know what? In verse 9, there's an encouragement. There's an encouragement that a young person should have cheer. They should be of good heart in the days of their youth. They should walk in the ways of their heart and in the sight of their eyes. Now, many people will take that the wrong way, is I think that a Christian, I think a servant of the Lord can be happy, can be pleasant, can have joy, can enjoy life. But look at the clause at the end of verse 9. It says, walk in the ways of your heart and in the sight of your eyes. But know that for all these God will bring into judgment. This is not a license for somebody that's young to do whatever they want. It is an encouragement to somebody that's young to enjoy life. Go out and experience some things. Go out and do some things. You're young. And guess what? When we're old, we're not able to do those things we used to be able to do when we were younger. So the Bible, I think, is encouraged. Go out and pursue life, but there's one thing that you cannot forget, is that you cannot leave God out of your picture. We have to have God constantly on our mind. And I think that we do God a disservice when we do not, I think, enjoy life. The Christian life is a beautiful and wonderful thing. It can be filled with joy, laughter, love, embrace. And I think that when we don't enjoy those things and we don't pursue those things, I think it's a disservice to God. I think it's a disservice to the world. In Matthew chapter 5, it talks about us being the lights of the world. Well, no one's going to want to become a Christian if they look at us all the time. They're like, they're always gloomy and they're always down and they're always, they want to see joy. They want to see happiness. They want to see those things. And I'm not saying that the Christian life always has it always appears to the world as the great life in terms of physical things. But a Christian's life, a servant of God, we can have a good life. We can have a life of joy, cheer, love, embrace. But we have to always remember that God is in that picture. You see right there, it said God will bring you into judgment. When you're young, certainly enjoy life. Go out and experience some things, but always keep God in your mind and always remember that He is watching and He will judge. And in Proverbs chapter 15 and verse 3, it says, the eyes of the Lord are in every place, keeping watch on the evil and the good. In Hebrews chapter 4 and verse 13, it says, there is no creature hidden from His sight, but all things are naked and open to the eyes of Him to whom we must all give an account. Certainly when we think of our life, it should be filled with those good and positive emotions. It should be filled with those things, but we should consider God along life's way. I've always thought of it like a fence. And a fence that God puts up is to protect us. The world does not like it that way, and they will try to convince us that God has put up fences that are unjust and unfair. But really, when you think of the fences that God has put up, He's trying to protect us. Probably the easiest one to reference is in relation to our physical relationships. God has put up a fence, has He not? He has put up a fence for our physical relationships in the confines of marriage. And that keeps us safe. And in fact, right now, the CDC would agree. The CDC would say, you know what? The best physical relationship you can have is one man, one woman for life. Now, I'm sure that'll change. But currently, the CDC, the Center of Disease Control, says, you know what? If you're going to have a physical relationship, the best physical relationship you can have is one man, one woman for life. God puts up fences to protect us. And a lot of people view those fences as unjust, but within the confines of God's fences, we can have joy, we can have happiness, we can have all these experiences, and if we realize that God really has our best interests in heart, He can truly protect us. We think about eating. God, I believe, puts up fences around eating. I think God says, you know what, you need to avoid gluttony, and I think also underneath the New Testament, I think we're allowed to eat all things, but I think blood would be one of those that is restricted. We're talking about the direct consumption of blood, which is what the Gentiles did in a lot of their worship, is they would cut an animal and they would literally just drink the blood. I think that is restricted based off the New Testament, and if you look at it from a biblical perspective all the way back, is that was restricted under the patriarchs, it was restricted for the Jews, and I think that when you look in the book of Acts, when we see the discussion of circumcision, I think it's also restricted there. But the confines of eating, we're allowed to eat all kinds of things. And we should enjoy those things. But God does put some boundaries around there. He says, you know what? Gluttony, keep that in mind. Blood, keep that in mind. But those things are really designed to protect us. We can enjoy so many things in life. But will we stay within God's fences? I think of work. There's a lot of things that we can do for a living, and I think work is good. Adam had work in the garden before sin entered the world. I think labor and work is good for us. I think it's good for our minds. It's good for us. And many times we look at individuals that give up all work in their lives, and it's a lot of times we can see them deteriorate because work is good. Work is a positive thing, but there's also a fence that God puts on work. There's certain things that we should not do to acquire money. And certain things of that nature. But work is good. So we see that in verse 9. I think it says, you know what? Being young is a part of our life. Enjoy that part of life, but keep God in mind because He will bring those things into judgment. Verse 10, it says, therefore, remove sorrow from your heart and put away evil from your flesh, for childhood and youth are vanity. There's a lot of things to consider here, and I think this is sometimes where Christians will miss the boat. As you look at verse 10, it says, therefore remove sorrow from your heart. Now that word can be translated a couple different ways, but really I think that we can understand the idea of sorrow. But sorrow I also associate with worry and anxiety. You know, worry, anxiety, and sorrow, all of those things, they will steal your joy, will they not? They will sap your happiness, will they not? And I think it's something to think about and consider. God tries to lead us away from worry and anxiety because I think God knows what it does to us. Worry and anxiety. I think God knows what it does to us. If you look at Matthew chapter 6, that is one of the primary focuses of Jesus when He's going through Matthew chapter 6. He's talking about anxiety, He's talking about worry, He's talking about these things. These things will zap some of those positive emotions that are so important for us to have as we go throughout this life. We can think of Philippians chapter 4, verses 4 through 6. Rejoice in the Lord always. Again, I say rejoice. Let your gentleness be known to all men. The Lord is at hand. Be anxious for nothing, but in everything, by prayer and supplication, with thanksgiving, let your requests be made known to God, and the peace of God, which surpasses all understanding, will guard your hearts and minds through Jesus Christ. God is trying to lead us to peace. He's trying to lead us to joy. But many times we fight God. We fight God. We try to run towards anxiety and worry when God is trying to lead us away from such things. What a blessing a Christian has that God offers peace. In fact, what do individuals stress about probably the most? They stress about death, and what has God taken off the table? He's tried to take that away, has He not? A victory over death? Eternity with Him in heaven? If we have our eternity worked out, if we are living faithfully in relation to God, that should do a lot for our attitude as we go throughout life. Certainly remembering our Creator helps. Probably it's not the best chapter break because verses 9 and 10 of chapter 11 are talking about youth, and I think the first verse of chapter 12 is kind of talking about youth as well. Remember now your Creator in the days of your youth before the difficult days come and the years draw near when you say, I have no pleasure in them. Certainly, God is not against us enjoying life. He wants us to enjoy life. He wants us to consider God as we go throughout life. There's a lot of things you can do in this life that are a waste. The main thing is that we're in a right relationship with God. But if we're in a right relationship with God, do you understand that it's a disservice to God to walk around with a negative attitude? To have a life where there's no laughter. To have a life where there's no love. To have a life where there's no embrace. To have a life where there's no smiles. To have a life where there's no joy. Is that what God wants for us? No. God wants us to have these things. And certainly I think He makes the road easier. I don't know about you, but I think God makes my life a lot easier to enjoy. And I think understanding that our life is short can help us to enjoy life all the more. When you start to think that you have only so many moments left, you have so many embraces left, you have so many more times to see your grandkids and your kids. When you realize that you only have so much time, I think it makes every moment all the more precious. As it says in Psalm 90, teach us to number our days, that we may gain a heart of wisdom. You know, a lot of people will get downtrodden on thinking on a short life. When you have a short life, there are two things that happen. When you accept that, I have a short life, number one is you get your priorities in order. When you realize I don't have a lot of time, you get your priorities in order, right? You got a test on Friday. Monday, you don't do anything. Tuesday, you don't do anything. You get to Thursday, and you're like, I got a test tomorrow. What happens? When you have a shorter amount of time, all of a sudden, you get your priorities in order. If you can accept that you don't have a long life, you'll get your priorities in order. Also, when we realize that we have a short life, I think we appreciate every moment all the more. I was talking to a preacher at church camp, and I was preaching on this particular subject, Psalm 90, where Moses is talking there. And but I was preaching on that, and he came to me after the lesson, and he walked up to me and said, that really hit me. He said, how many holidays do I have left with my kids? He started looking at his age, he started thinking about his life, and he said, you know what, I don't have that many left. When you realize you are on a timetable, you appreciate every moment all the more. So we have youth, and with youth, I think there should be joy, there should be cheer, there should be these positive emotions. We just have to keep God in our minds. And then in chapter 12, we're getting a summary for life. What we're going to have is a fast forward, are we not? After chapter 12 and verse 1, it's going to basically fast forward through the aging process. And certainly none of us are going to beat, time. Is that time is going to wear on us all, and our bodies were not designed to go forever, and we start to see in the following verses the deterioration of our physical bodies. And although I don't want to linger a whole long on this, is basically we do have a summary of life. Hey, here's youth. Enjoy it, because there's days coming where your physical body is going to wear down and things are going to change, and you're not going to be able to do the things that you once were able to do. Look at verse 2. It says, while the sun and light and the moon and the stars are not darkened and the clouds do not return after rain. We kind of get into some of this poetic and figurative language. In verse 3, it says, in the day when the keepers of the house tremble. I believe that to be the hands. As we age, we don't have as much steadiness as we used to have. And I believe the keeper of the house, that's in relation to the hands. And then we start to continue on. It says, the strong men will bow down low. Perhaps this is the weakening of the back. Then it says, when the grinders cease because they are few. I believe that's talking about our teeth. As we start to lose our teeth, there's a deterioration process that's happening with the human body. It's being described. And it says, and those that look through the windows grow dim. I think that's talking about our eyes. Is our bodies were not meant to go forever. And we're seeing the aging process. We see youth. And then we start to see the aging process that's happening here. In verse 4, it says, when the doors are shut in the streets and the sound of the grinders is low, when one rises up at the sound of a bird and all the daughters of the music are brought low. This is kind of poetic language, and I'm not saying that I have the perfect answer on all of this, but in verse 4 it says, when the doors are shut in the streets, I kind of get the idea is that when people get older, do they go out as much? Kind of like it at home, you know. I could be wrong on that, okay? I could be wrong on that. But when the doors are shut in the streets, is older people, they don't make the way out as much. When the sound of the grinders is low, a lot of people suggest that this is the loss of hearing. But look at what's right after it. It says the sound of the grinding is low. When one rises up, the sound of the bird and all the daughters of the music are brought low. It could perhaps be singing, but some people have suggested that the grinding is low would be like going to work. Is you don't hear the work sounds that you used to hear because you're not going to work. The grinding is low because you look and it says when one rises up at the sound of a bird. So you can hear the birds. The birds aren't the loudest creature ever. So perhaps it's talking about, as you get older, you don't go out as much. You're not doing as much work as you used to do. There's certain sounds that you don't hear quite as much. But certainly, as people age, we see that a lot of times that there is a loss of hearing in that respect. Verse 5, it says, also they are afraid of height, and that there are terrors in the way. When the almond tree blossoms and the grasshopper is a burden, and desire fails, for the man goes to his eternal home, and the mourners go about the streets. Certainly there's a lot there in verse 5. It looks like there's a fear of high places. And we know as people age that our bones aren't as strong as they used to be, and a fall could mean a lot of breaks and a lot of damage. A young person falls, Uriah. I mean, he just runs and he falls like every 2 minutes, I feel like. He's running, fall, run, fall, I mean, he's getting a gauge of his body and learn all these things. But as we age, we can't take as many falls as we used to. And I think that there's a fear there. There's a fear in relation to that. Also, I think as we age, we lose a little bit of a sense of balance. I was working on my house, and I have a neighbor. He's 90-some years old. He's a World War II veteran, and he actually helped me out with some things with my house. But he came up there, and I had these boards that were laid out to run up onto the house because it was a little bit above the ground, and I just had the ground floor there, and there's just these boards. I got no problem running up those. He went over to one of those, and he was like, I'm going to go up this thing. I'm like, no, please don't run. Please don't go up that. The board, it's just like a 2x4, don't go up that, 90-some years old trying to run up a 2x4, But, as you age, you wish you could do those things that you used to be able to do. And a lot of times you think, oh, this is nothing. And then you wake up the next day and you're like, oh, that hurt me a lot more than I thought it would, I'm a little bit more sore than I thought I would be. In verse 5, there's a lot of different translations of this passage. It's just to be fair. When you look at the tree blossoms, a lot of people associate that with the almond tree. It would change colors. And as we age, a lot of times, our hair will change color. And that'll happen. And but there's actually a lot of different translations of this. I'm not saying that it's a big deal, but some instead of talking about the grasshopper here, some of them mention a particular berry, and it kind of goes there. But I think as we work our way down through this passage, we're seeing that we have some poetic, figurative language, but we see as we age. And there's no one that's going to escape this. So if anyone looks at this and say, oh, this is not going to happen to me, well, it's going to happen. It's just a matter of time. It's just a matter of time. Time is undefeated. And our bodies certainly were not designed to go forever. And Solomon kind of uses the idea of a house. I think he kind of uses the idea of a house. And I think about that idea, and certainly Paul uses the idea of a house in 2 Corinthians chapter 5. In 2 Corinthians chapter 5, verses 1 through 4. It says, for we know that if our earthly house, this tent, is destroyed, we have a building from God, a house not made with hands, eternal in the heavens. For in this we groan earnestly, desiring to be clothed with our habitation, which is from heaven, if indeed, having been clothed, we shall not be found naked. For we are in this tent, groan, being burdened, not because we want to be unclothed, but further clothed, that mortality will be swallowed up by life. Now he who has prepared us for this very thing is God, who also has given us the Spirit as a guarantee. In 2 Corinthians chapter 5, we get this idea of a tent. And I don't know how you think of your body, but your body is a temporary dwelling place. And our tent wears down. Our body wears down, and certainly as that process happens, our life does become more difficult. There are things that we used to do that we are not being able to do, and we talked about that idea of renting this morning. Is really, I think everything you look at in life, you could basically say you're renting. Is that we are just good stewards of that which we have. Now some people view it the wrong way. Since I'm renting these things, I should do whatever I want with them. That's not the right mentality. Is that even though I'm renting these things, I should be a good steward of these things, and I should take care of them as best I can. And your body is one of them. Is your body you should take care of. It is certainly a gift from God, but the reality is our body is not supposed to stay around forever. We were made from the dust, and to the dust we shall return. No doubt about that. Verses 6 and 7. It says, remember the Creator before the silver cord is loosened, or the golden bowl is broken, or the pitcher is shattered at the foundation, or the wheel broken at the well. Here in verse 6, I think you get really a picture of a couple different things. Really, I would say 4. And all 4 of these things, I think, are an expression of death. Life is valuable, but life cannot be recovered. You know, sometimes things are broken at my house. And my kids will run to me and say, Daddy, fix it. Daddy, fix it. Well, you know what? Every once in a while, my kids will run up to me with something I can't fix. And really, what you have a picture of in verse 6 is things that cannot be fixed. Remember your Creator before the silver cord is loosened. The golden bowl is broken. The pitcher shatters at the foundation, or the wheel broken at the well. I think you kind of have an idea of 4 expressions of a picture of death. Is life is incredibly valuable, but I think the illustration is that once broken, there are some things that cannot be recovered, and life is not one of those. And doesn't that make it all the more precious? Is that we only have a life, and that once that life is gone, it will be gone. Verse 7, it says, then the dust will return to the earth, and it was as the spirit will return to God who gave it. Our spirit is eternal. It will go to God, and certainly God will judge. But certainly when it comes to our body, we see that will be the end. In Genesis chapter 3 and verse 19, it says, in the sweat of your face you shall eat bread till you return to the ground. For out of it you were taken, for dust you are, and to dust you shall return. And in Job chapter 34 and verse 15, all flesh would perish together, and man would return to dust. But certainly that spirit goes to God. You know, when you look at the Old Testament, you look at the New Testament, certainly the Old Testament is pointing to so many things in the New Testament, but a focus of the New Testament that I would say is not a primary focus of the Old Testament is immortality. And I'm not saying it's not there, but really, look at 2 Timothy chapter 1 and verse 10. 2 Timothy chapter 1 and verse 10. It says something there that I think is powerful, and it's in relation to Jesus and what he has really, really done for us. In 2 Timothy chapter 1 and verse 10, it says this, but has now been revealed by the appearing of our Savior Jesus Christ, who has abolished death and brought life and immortality to light through the gospel. Has brought life and immortality to light through the gospel. Through the Old Testament, I think there's certainly some ideas that you could say are pointing towards immortality. But when we get to Jesus Christ, he's making it very clear. He's making it very clear, and through the gospel, I think that there is an idea that we are going to have this immortality. We're going to have this eternity, and certainly our life here upon this earth is going to have a lot in determining that. And then we come to the conclusion of the book. It says, and moreover, because the preacher was wise, he still taught the people knowledge. Yes, he pondered and sought out and set in order many proverbs. The preacher sought to find acceptable words, and what was written was upright, words of truth. The words of the wise are like goads, and the words of the scholars are like well-driven nails given by one shepherd. And further, my son, be admonished by these, of making many books there is no end, and much study is wearisome to the flesh. Let's hear the conclusion of the whole matter. Fear God and keep his commandments, for this is man's all. For God will bring every work into judgment, including every secret thing, whether good or bad. There in Proverbs chapter 12 and verse 9, I think it's a strong point that the preacher is Solomon, because we get the idea that he has put together Proverbs, but also I think we see the teaching process in verse 9. It says, because the preacher was wise, he still taught the people knowledge. Yes, he pondered, sought out, and set in order. Think about that. What did the preacher do? What did Solomon do before he wrote this, before he presented this? It says he pondered, he sought out, and he set in order. If you're going to present anything to anyone, what should you do? You should ponder, you should seek things, and you should set it in a particular order. And I think we see that in verse 9. And he talks about the words that he has compiled, he believes are truth. These are good words that should be followed. And then it talks about really worldly wisdom. There's a lot of books you can read in this earth. A lot of books you can read. Nothing will compare to the Bible. Nothing will compare to God's Word. You know, I think it takes about, I could be wrong, but I think it takes 70 hours to read the Bible. And if you divided that over 365 days, it's about 15 minutes a day for the average reader. I think it's about 70 hours, you can look it up, 70 hours to read the Bible in a year, and that's about 15 minutes a day. Okay, now you say, well, I want to stop and think about it. Okay, well, go up to 30 minutes. Go up to 30 minutes. But I think if you look at those calculations, there's no book that's more valuable. Certainly we'll read everything under the sun, but do we read the book that matters the most? Let's hear the conclusion of the whole matter. Fear God and keep his commandments, for this is man's all. For he will bring every work into judgment and every secret thing. You know, when you think about it, at the end of the day, what's most important in life? That we can spend eternity with God in heaven. There's a lot of things that we can spend our time on, but don't miss that point. Enjoy life, certainly, but don't miss the eternity that we will face. Perhaps you need to become a New Testament Christian this evening. Perhaps you need the prayers of the church. We'd love to help you in any way we can this evening if you come as we stand, as we sing.